The icy wind cut through the threadbare wool dress like a knife, and Joanna Zimmerman wondered if she would survive another night in the Montana Territory. She stood outside McAllister's trading post in Taylor, Montana, her teeth chattering so violently she could hear them clacking together, watching the sun disappear behind the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountains in late November of 1878. She had been standing there for nearly an hour, trying to work up the courage to go inside and beg for work, knowing full well that a woman alone with no references and no money had few options in a frontier town. Her father had died 3 weeks ago from pneumonia, leaving her orphaned at 19 with nothing but the clothes on her back and a debt to the company store that she could never hope to repay. The mining company had taken everything, even the small cabin they had called home for the past 2 years. The trading post door swung open and a wall of warmth beckoned her, but Joanna remained frozen in place, her pride still wrestling with her desperation. She watched as men filed in and out, trappers and miners and ranchers, all with purpose and destination. She had neither. "You planning on growing roots there, miss?" The voice came from behind her, deep and rough like gravel rolling down a mountainside. Joanna turned and found herself staring at the broadest chest she had ever seen, covered in fringed buckskin that stretched across muscles that seemed hewn from the very mountains themselves. Her eyes traveled upward, past shoulders that could have carried an ox, to a face weathered by sun and wind, framed by dark brown hair that fell past his collar. His eyes were the color of aged whiskey, warm despite the concern that creased his brow. "I am fine, thank you," she managed through chattering teeth, the lie obvious to them both. The mountain man studied her for a long moment, his gaze taking in her threadbare dress, her thin shawl, her blue-tinged fingers. Without a word, he shrugged off the massive bearskin coat that covered his shoulders and in one smooth motion wrapped it around her. The weight of it nearly knocked her over, but the warmth was immediate and overwhelming. The fur still held his body heat, and it smelled of pine smoke, leather, and something wild and masculine that made her head spin. "I cannot accept this," Joanna protested, even as her body betrayed her by burrowing deeper into the blessed warmth. "You will freeze." "I have another coat inside," he said, which may or may not have been true. "Name is Kade Zeller. You look like you could use a hot meal. I do not have money for food. Did not ask if you did." His tone was matter-of-fact, not unkind. "Come on. You are about to fall over, and I would rather you do it somewhere warm." Joanna wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity, but her body had other ideas. Her knees buckled slightly, and Kade caught her elbow with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a man of his size. "Easy now," he murmured, guiding her toward the trading post entrance. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning," she admitted, though it had actually been longer. The stale bread she had choked down yesterday hardly counted as a meal. Kade made a low sound of displeasure in his chest and pushed open the door, ushering her into the warmth. The trading post was crowded with men seeking refuge from the bitter cold, but Kade navigated through them like a bear through underbrush, clearing a path to the small area in the back where McAllister served food. "2 bowls of whatever is hot," Kade told the wizened Scottish trader, dropping coins on the counter. "And coffee, lots of it." "Aye, Kade, that your woman?" McAllister asked with a knowing grin. "She is a person who needs food," Kade replied evenly, pulling out a rough-hewn chair for Joanna at one of the small tables. "Leave off the questions." Joanna sank into the chair, still wrapped in the enormous bearskin coat. She knew she should feel embarrassed, should care that everyone in the trading post was staring at her, but she was too cold and too hungry to manage it. The heat from the pot-bellied stove in the corner seeped into her bones, and she had to fight the urge to weep from sheer relief. Kade settled into the chair across from her, which creaked under his weight. He had gone back to his supplies and retrieved another coat, this one made of thick wool and buffalo hide, though it was not nearly as warm as the bearskin he had given her. Now that she could see him properly in the lamplight, she realized he was probably in his mid-20s, though the wilderness had aged him in some ways. His hands, resting on the table, were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who lived by his strength and skill. "Thank you," Joanna said quietly. "I will repay you for the meal. How exactly do you plan to do that?" His question was not mocking, just curious. "I will find work. Someone in town must need help." "Doing what?" Kade asked, and Joanna felt her cheeks heat with embarrassment because they both knew what kind of work was usually available to women alone on the frontier. "I can read and write," she said defensively. "I can keep accounts, do laundry, cook, clean. My father taught me to read maps and ledgers." "I am not useless. Never said you were." Kade leaned back in his chair, studying her with those whiskey-colored eyes. "What happened to your father, pneumonia, 3 weeks ago?" The words came out flat, emotionless. She had no tears left to cry. "The mining company took our cabin to settle his debts. I have been sleeping in the old livery stable, but the owner is returning tomorrow, and I will have to find somewhere else." McAllister appeared with 2 steaming bowls of venison stew and thick slices of bread. The smell made Joanna's stomach clench painfully. She forced herself to eat slowly, aware of Kade watching her, making sure she did not make herself sick. "You got any other family?" he asked, eating his own stew at a more leisurely pace. "No. My mother died when I was 12. It was just my father and me." Joanna dipped the bread into the rich gravy, savoring every bite. "We came west 2 years ago, looking for a fresh start after the bank took our farm in Ohio. He thought he could make money in the mines, but he was never strong enough for that kind of work. The dust got into his lungs." She did not know why she was telling this stranger her life story, but something about Kade Zeller made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father first took ill. He listened without judgment, his presence solid and reassuring. "I have a proposition for you," Kade said after she had finished eating. "I need someone to help me through the winter. I have a cabin about 10 miles up in the mountains, good and sturdy, plenty of supplies. But I broke my arm back in September, and it did not heal right." He held up his left arm, and Joanna could see how he favored it. "Makes it hard to do certain tasks, like fine sewing and mending, cooking anything complicated, keeping my clothes and gear in good repair. I can offer you room and board through the winter, separate sleeping quarters, and I will pay you in gold dust when spring comes. Enough to buy passage back east or set yourself up here if you want to stay." Joanna stared at him, trying to determine if this was some kind of trick. "You are offering me work, just like that." "I am offering you work," Kade confirmed. "It will not be easy. Winters in the mountains are harsh and we will be snowed in for months. But you will be warm and fed, and you will not have to worry about the kind of trouble a woman alone faces in a mining town. You do not know me. I could be a thief. I could murder you in your sleep." Kade's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "You could try. But I am a light sleeper, and I do not think you have it in you. Besides, you are too honest for your own good. A thief would have just taken the coat and run." He had a point. Joanna turned the offer over in her mind, looking for the catch, but she could not find one. Even if Kade had ulterior motives, her current situation was so desperate that taking a chance seemed smarter than freezing to death in an abandoned livery stable. "Separate sleeping quarters," she confirmed. "My cabin has 2 rooms. You would have the bedroom. I will take the main room by the fire. And in the spring you will pay me. In the spring I will pay you, Kade agreed. Enough to give you choices. That is all any of us can ask for. Joanna took a deep breath, feeling as if she stood on the edge of a cliff about to jump. Then I accept. Thank you, Mr. Zeller. Just Kade. We are going to be living in close quarters for months, no point in being formal. Joanna, she offered. Joanna Zimmerman. They shook hands across the table, his massive paw engulfing her small, cold fingers. His grip was gentle but firm, and Joanna felt something shift in her chest, a flutter of something she could not quite name. We will leave at first light, Kade said, releasing her hand. McAllister will let you sleep in the storeroom tonight and I will get us provisioned. Do you have anything you need to collect? Nothing worth collecting, Joanna admitted. Everything she owned was currently on her person. Kade nodded as if he had expected as much. Then we will get you some proper clothes. Cannot have you hiking through the mountains in a dress. He stood and went to speak with McAllister, and Joanna watched him go, still wrapped in his bearskin coat. She had gone from utterly alone to employed in the space of an hour, and she did not quite know what to make of it. Kade Zeller was unlike any man she had ever met. He moved with the confidence of someone completely at home in his own skin, and there was a quiet strength about him that had nothing to do with his impressive physical size. McAllister showed her to the storeroom, which was crowded with goods, but had a small cot in the corner that was infinitely better than the cold hay she had been sleeping on. The trader also provided her with a blanket and a basin of water so she could wash, luxuries she had not enjoyed in weeks. That night, wrapped in both the blanket and Kade's bearskin coat, Joanna slept better than she had since her father died. For the first time in weeks, she felt a tiny spark of hope kindle in her chest. She woke before dawn to the sounds of men preparing for the day. Someone knocked on the storeroom door, and McAllister's voice called through. "Time to rise, lass. Kade is waiting." Joanna folded the blanket neatly and made sure the storeroom was exactly as she had found it before emerging into the main trading post. Kade stood by the counter, and beside him was a stack of supplies that made her eyes widen. "Morning," he greeted her, handing her a bundle. "There is a room in the back where you can change. I got you woolen trousers, a shirt, a vest, and a coat. Also boots. I guessed at the sizes." Joanna took the bundle, speechless. The clothes alone represented more money than she could have earned in a month. "Kade, this is too much." "It is practical," he corrected. "You cannot work if you freeze to death. Consider it part of your wages." She wanted to argue, but she also desperately wanted the warm clothes, so she retreated to change. The trousers felt strange after years in dresses, but they were warm and allowed for much easier movement. The boots were slightly too large, but thick socks solved that problem. When she emerged, Kade gave her an approving nod. "Better. Can you ride?" "Not well," Joanna admitted. "The horse I got for you is gentle. Her name is Daisy and she knows the trail. Just hold on and let her do the work." Outside, 2 horses waited, loaded with supplies. The sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the snow-covered peaks in shades of pink and gold. Kade helped Joanna mount Daisy, his hands steadying her until she found her balance. 10 miles, he said, swinging onto his own horse with easy grace. "We should be there by midday if the weather holds." They set out as the sun crested the mountains, riding through a landscape so beautiful it made Joanna's heart ache. The trail climbed steadily upward, winding through forests of pine and aspen. Snow clung to the branches, and their breath formed white clouds in the cold air. Kade led the way, occasionally turning to make sure she was still following, his sharp eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. They stopped once to water the horses at a frozen creek, and Kade produced jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags. They ate standing up, stomping their feet to keep warm, saying little. Joanna was grateful for the silence. Her mind was still trying to catch up with the sudden change in her circumstances. The cabin appeared suddenly, nestled in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. It was larger than Joanna had expected, built from thick logs chinked with clay, with a stone chimney and shuttered windows. A small barn stood nearby for the horses, and Joanna could see that Kade had spent considerable effort making this place secure and comfortable. "Home," Kade said simply, dismounting. "Come on, let us get the horses settled and a fire going." The next hour passed in a flurry of activity. Kade showed Joanna how to care for the horses, where he kept the feed and tack. The barn was neat and well organized, which told her much about the man she would be spending the winter with. Inside the cabin, Kade built up the fire in the massive stone fireplace while Joanna looked around. The main room held a table and chairs, a workbench covered with traps and tools, shelves lined with supplies, and a bed in the corner piled with furs. A door led to the smaller room that would be hers. It contained a single bed, a small dresser, and a chair, but it was clean and well built, with no drafts that she could feel. "It is not fancy," Kade said from the doorway, "but it is warm and dry." "It is wonderful," Joanna said honestly. After weeks of uncertainty and fear, having a room of her own felt like a miracle. They spent the rest of the day settling in. Kade showed Joanna where everything was stored, how to operate the pump for water, where the woodpile was. He moved about with economic efficiency, favoring his left arm but managing well enough. Joanna could see the old break had healed crooked, limiting his range of motion. That evening, she cooked her first meal in the cabin, a simple stew with the vegetables and salt pork Kade had among his supplies. He ate with obvious appreciation, and Joanna felt a small glow of pride. It felt good to be useful again, to have purpose. "Tell me about yourself," Joanna said as they ate. "How did you become a mountain man?" Kade was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "Came west 10 years ago from Pennsylvania. My family were farmers and I was supposed to take over the farm, but I never quite fit. Too restless. Wanted to see what was beyond the next hill. So I left and kept going west until I ran out of east. Worked as a trapper, a guide, a scout. Learned from the native tribes, learned from other mountain men. Built this cabin 5 years ago. It suits me. Do you ever get lonely?" The question slipped out before Joanna could stop it. "Sometimes," Kade admitted. "But I prefer my own company to bad company, and most folks do not understand the pull of the mountains. What about you? What did you want before life got in the way?" No one had ever asked Joanna what she wanted. Women were not usually afforded the luxury of wants. "I wanted to be a teacher," she said quietly. "I loved learning, loved books. My father encouraged it, even though most people thought it was foolish to educate a girl so thoroughly. But after my mother died, it was just about surviving. We moved too much, had too little. Dreams seemed like luxuries we could not afford." "Maybe you will still be a teacher one day," Kade said. "Like I said, come spring, you will have enough money for choices." That night, Joanna lay in her small bed, listening to the wind howl outside and the crackling of the fire in the main room. For the first time since her father's death, she felt safe. Kade had given her that, this stranger who had wrapped her in his coat and offered her hope. The days developed a rhythm. Joanna woke early to start the fire and make breakfast. Kade would see to the horses and check his trap lines, returning with whatever game he had caught. Joanna would prepare the animals, learning from Kade how to properly skin and preserve meat and furs. Her hands, soft from town life, developed calluses and strength. She mended his clothes, finding bullet holes and claw marks that spoke of a dangerous life. She organized his supplies, improved his cooking, darned his socks. Kade, in turn, taught her the skills of mountain living. How to read weather signs, how to identify animal tracks, which plants were edible and which were poison. He was a patient teacher, never mocking her mistakes, always willing to show her again. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, and Kade would carve wood while Joanna read aloud from the small collection of books he owned. He particularly liked Shakespeare, which surprised her. This rough mountain man who could kill a bear with his bare hands had a secret love of poetry and stories. "My mother used to read to me," he explained one night when she commented on it. "She wanted me to remember that there was more to the world than just the farm, that there was beauty and art and ideas. I think that is partly why I could never stay." She sounds like a wise woman. She was, is, I should write to her more often. As November turned into December, the snow deepened and they found themselves truly isolated. The world beyond the cabin ceased to exist. It was just the two of them, the horses, and the endless white expanse of winter. Joanna should have felt trapped, but instead she felt free. There were no expectations here, no judgments, no one telling her who she should be or what she should want. She caught herself watching Kade sometimes, the way his muscles flexed when he split wood, the concentration on his face when he repaired a trap, the gentleness with which he handled a wounded rabbit one of his traps had caught. He released it, fashioning a splint for its leg with quick, efficient movements. "Trap was in the wrong place," he explained, seeing her watching. "Not its fault. No sense in killing something that was not meant to be caught." It was such a small thing, but it told Joanna everything about who Kade was at his core. Strong but not cruel, powerful but not destructive. Christmas approached, not that there was much way to mark it in the mountains. Joanna mentioned it one morning, and Kade surprised her by suggesting they do something to celebrate. "Not much call for celebrating when you are alone," he said, "but seems a shame to let it pass without notice." On Christmas Eve, Joanna baked bread and made a special stew with dried berries and honey. Kade disappeared for several hours and returned with a small pine tree, which he set up in the corner. They decorated it with strings of dried berries and small carved ornaments that Kade fashioned from wood. It was humble, but it was the most beautiful Christmas tree Joanna had ever seen. "I have something for you," Kade said after dinner. He went to his trunk and pulled out a bundle wrapped in cloth. "Was not sure if it would be right, but I made it anyway." Joanna unwrapped the bundle and gasped. It was a dress, beautifully made from soft buckskin with intricate beadwork across the bodice. The beads formed a pattern of mountains and stars. "Kade, this is exquisite. When did you make this?" "Nights when you were sleeping. The arm makes it hard to do detailed work, but I managed." "Thought you might like to have something nice, something that was yours." Joanna ran her fingers over the beadwork, overwhelmed. No one had ever made her anything so beautiful. "I love it, but I did not make anything for you." "You have been making things for me every day," Kade said quietly. "You made this place feel like a home instead of just a shelter. That is gift enough." Their eyes met across the firelight, and something passed between them, something that made Joanna's breath catch. She saw the way Kade looked at her, saw something warm and wanting in his whiskey-colored eyes, and she realized with a start that she looked at him the same way. "Try it on," Kade said, breaking the moment. Joanna retreated to her room and changed into the dress. It fit perfectly, the soft leather molding to her figure. When she emerged, Kade's eyes widened. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you," Joanna whispered, suddenly shy. They sat by the fire late into the night, talking about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Kade told her about the time he had been trapped in a blizzard for 3 days with nothing but a buffalo hide for shelter. Joanna told him about the summer she was 14 when she and her father had lived on nothing but fish and wild onions because the crops had failed. "We survive," Kade said. "That is what people do. We survive and we keep going." "Is that enough?" Joanna asked. "Just surviving." Kade looked at her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "No, but sometimes surviving is all we can manage until we figure out how to live." January brought fierce storms that kept them confined to the cabin for days at a time. The proximity forced an intimacy that went beyond physical closeness. They learned each other's moods, each other's silences. Joanna could tell when Kade's arm pained him and would prepare willow bark tea without being asked. Kade knew when Joanna felt restless and would suggest projects to keep her occupied. One night, when the wind shrieked around the cabin and the cold penetrated even their thick walls, Joanna woke to find the fire had died down. She got up to rebuild it and found Kade already there, feeding logs into the flames. "Sorry," he said. "Did not mean to wake you." "You did not." "The cold did." Joanna wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat beside him. "Your arm is bothering you." It was not a question. She had learned to read the signs the way he held himself when pain flared. "It aches in the cold," Kade admitted. "Old wounds do that. How did you break it?" "Got between a mother bear and her cubs. My own fault. Should have been more careful. She knocked me into a ravine and the arm snapped when I hit bottom. I managed to set it myself and splint it, but I was a week getting back to civilization, and by then it had started to heal wrong. Doc said he could re-break it and try again, but I decided to let it be." Joanna reached out and took his left hand in hers, examining the arm. She could feel where the bone had mended crookedly. "Does it hurt now?" "Some. Not as bad as it used to." Without thinking, Joanna began to massage the arm, working the tight muscles with gentle pressure. Kade went very still, and she realized how intimate the gesture was, but she did not stop. "That helps," he said quietly. They sat there by the fire, Joanna working the tension from his arm, neither of them speaking. The wind howled, but inside the cabin it was warm and safe. When she finally stopped, Kade caught her hand. "Joanna," he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "I know you have only been here a few months, and I know we agreed this was just work, but I need to be honest with you. Somewhere along the way, this stopped being just an arrangement for me. I look forward to seeing you every morning. I think about you when I am out on the trap lines. I want to hear your thoughts on everything. I am falling in love with you and I needed to say it, even if you do not feel the same." Joanna's heart hammered in her chest. She looked at their joined hands, his so large and scarred, hers small and pale against his. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, telling myself it was foolish, that I should not confuse gratitude with something deeper. But it is not gratitude. I love you, Kade. I think I started loving you the moment you wrapped that bearskin coat around me." Kade cupped her face with his good hand, his thumb brushing across her cheek. "I want to kiss you. May I?" Joanna nodded, unable to speak, and Kade leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, full of promise. Joanna melted into him, her hands coming up to rest on his broad chest, feeling the steady thump of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Kade rested his forehead against hers. "I want you to know that nothing has to change. You still have your room, your privacy. I will not rush you or push you. I just needed you to know how I feel." "I know," Joanna said, "and I appreciate that. But Kade, I do not want my own room anymore. I want to be with you." "Joanna, are you sure? I need you to be certain." "I have never been more certain of anything." She took his hand and stood, pulling him to his feet. "I love you. I want to be yours if you will have me." Kade swept her into his arms, cradling her against his massive chest as if she weighed nothing. "I will have you every day for the rest of my life if you will let me." He carried her to his bed in the corner, laying her down gently on the furs. The firelight played across his features as he looked down at her, and Joanna thought she had never seen anything more beautiful than this strong, gentle man who had saved her life and stolen her heart. That night, they discovered each other with tender passion, learning the landscape of each other's bodies, speaking in whispers and touches. Kade was gentle but thorough, treating her like something precious. Joanna had heard other women speak of the marriage bed with dread or resignation, but this was nothing like that. This was joy and connection, two souls finding home in each other. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the furs, Joanna's head on Kade's chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Marry me," Kade said into the darkness. Joanna lifted her head to look at him. "What, marry me? I know it is sudden, but out here time moves different. I know what I want, and I want you. Not just for the winter, not just until spring. Forever. Marry me, Joanna." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." Kade kissed her again, sealing the promise, and Joanna felt as if her heart might burst from happiness. She had come so close to losing everything, and instead she had found more than she ever dreamed possible. The next morning they woke tangled together, and neither seemed inclined to move. Kade played with her hair, winding the blonde strands around his fingers, while Joanna traced the scars on his chest. "Tell me about these," she said. So Kade told her the story behind each scar, a road map of his life in the wilderness. The bear that had given him the thick white line across his ribs. The mountain lion that had left claw marks on his shoulder. The arrow that had grazed his side during a misunderstanding with a hunting party. Each scar had a story, and Joanna listened to them all, committing them to memory. "You have lived such an extraordinary life," she said. "It has been a life," Kade agreed, "but it will be better with you in it." February brought a thaw, and Kade insisted on taking Joanna to show her more of his mountain domain. They hiked through the forest on snowshoes he had made for her, and he pointed out his trap lines, the places where he had seen elk and deer, the hot spring that bubbled up from the rocks. "A hot spring," Joanna repeated, delighted. "Why did you not tell me about this before?" "Did not seem proper," Kade admitted, "but I suppose that concern is past now." They bathed in the hot spring, the steam rising around them in the cold air, and Joanna felt like she was in a dream. The water was perfectly warm, and Kade pulled her onto his lap, kissing her until she was breathless. "I love you," he murmured against her lips. "My fierce, beautiful Joanna." "I love you too," she whispered back. "My mountain man." In March, the snow began to melt in earnest, and they could hear the ice breaking up in the streams. Kade took advantage of the better weather to take Joanna on longer expeditions, teaching her to shoot, to track, to read the forest. She proved an apt pupil, absorbing everything he taught her with quick intelligence. "You would have made a good scout," Kade told her one afternoon after she successfully tracked a deer for 2 miles. "Perhaps I still will," Joanna said with a smile. "After all, I have an excellent teacher." As April arrived and the first green shoots pushed up through the melting snow, they began to talk seriously about the future. "I want to marry you proper," Kade said one morning over breakfast. "With a preacher and witnesses. I want everyone to know you are mine and I am yours." "I would like that," Joanna agreed. "When?" "As soon as the trails are clear enough to get to Taylor. Another few weeks, probably. And Joanna, I know I promised to pay you come spring, give you money for a new start. That still stands. If you want to go back east, want to be a teacher like you dreamed, I will not stop you." Joanna reached across the table and took his hand. "My place is with you. Wherever you go, whatever you do, that is where I want to be. You are my home now, Kade. His hand tightened on hers. We could stay here year-round if you wanted. I have enough put by that we would not have to worry. Or we could winter in Taylor, have a house in town. Whatever you want. I like it here, Joanna said honestly. I like the peace, the beauty. I like that it is just us. But maybe we could spend some time in town too, so I am not so isolated. Is that asking too much? It is not asking too much, Kade assured her. We will figure it out together. That is what partners do. In late April, when the trails were finally clear, they packed up and rode down to Taylor. The town looked different to Joanna now, less threatening, more manageable. She was different too. Stronger, more confident, sure of her place in the world. They went straight to the small church where the circuit preacher happened to be in town. Reverend Collins was a jovial man who had known Kade for years. "About time you settled down," the Reverend said, pumping Kade's hand enthusiastically. "And with such a lovely bride. When do you want to do this?" "Now," Kade said, "if you are willing." "Now," Joanna repeated, surprised. "Why wait?" Kade asked. "Unless you want a big wedding with all the trimmings." Joanna thought about it for about 2 seconds. "No, now is perfect." They were married in the small church with McAllister and his wife as witnesses. Joanna wore her buckskin dress, and Kade wore clean buckskins and had even trimmed his hair. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Kade kissed her thoroughly, much to the amusement of their small audience. "Well now, Mrs. Zeller," Kade said when they finally broke apart. "How does it feel to be a married woman?" "Ask me again in 50 years, Joanna replied, grinning. They stayed in Taylor for a week, and Kade introduced Joanna to everyone as his wife with obvious pride. They bought supplies and new clothes, and Kade insisted on getting Joanna a proper rifle of her own. "Every mountain woman needs a good rifle," he said. They also visited the land office, where Kade filed a homestead claim on his mountain property, putting both their names on the deed. "It is as much yours as mine," he told Joanna. "Everything I have is yours." On their last night in town, they had dinner at the hotel, and Kade presented Joanna with a wedding ring, a simple gold band that he had commissioned from the local blacksmith. "It is not fancy," he said as he slipped it onto her finger, "but it is real like us." "It is perfect," Joanna assured him. "Like you." They returned to the mountains as husband and wife, and Joanna felt the rightness of it in her bones. This was where she belonged, in this wild, beautiful place with this wild, beautiful man. Summer in the mountains was glorious. They tended a garden Kade had planted, and Joanna marveled at the abundance of life all around them. Deer grazed in their meadow. Eagles soared overhead. At night, they would lie outside on a pile of furs, looking at the stars and talking about everything and nothing. Joanna discovered she was pregnant in August. She had suspected for a few weeks but wanted to be sure before she told Kade. When she finally shared the news, he went very still. "A baby," he repeated, his voice strangled. "We are having a baby in the spring," Joanna confirmed, suddenly nervous. They had never discussed children. "Kade, say something. Are you happy?" In response, Kade let out a whoop of joy that probably scared every animal within a mile radius. He picked Joanna up and spun her around, then immediately set her down carefully as if she might break. "Sorry, should not have done that. Are you well? Do you feel sick? Should you be resting?" Joanna laughed at his sudden concern. "I am fine. Pregnant women are not fragile. You are carrying my child. That makes you precious beyond measure." Kade knelt down and placed his hand over her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I already love you more than I knew was possible." Tears sprang to Joanna's eyes. "You are going to be a wonderful father." "I am going to try," Kade promised. "I am going to try my damnedest." That winter, they made preparations for the baby. Kade built a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it until there was not a single rough edge. Joanna sewed tiny clothes and blankets. They argued good-naturedly about names, finally agreeing that if it was a boy, they would name him Thomas after Joanna's father, and if it was a girl, they would name her Rose after Kade's mother. Joanna's pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Kade fussed over her constantly, much to her amusement. He would not let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest frequently, and cooked dinner himself on days when she was tired. His protectiveness was endearing, if occasionally excessive. In February, when the snow was deep and the world was white, Joanna went into labor. Kade had arranged for a midwife from Taylor to come stay with them the last month, a sensible woman named Martha who had delivered half the babies in the territory. The labor was long and hard, but Martha was skilled and Kade never left Joanna's side, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement. When their son finally arrived just before dawn, Kade wept openly at the sound of his first cry. "Thomas," Joanna whispered, exhausted but elated. "Thomas Zeller." Kade held his son with infinite care, this huge mountain man cradling the tiny infant against his chest. "Hello, Thomas. I am your papa. I promise I will keep you safe and loved always." Joanna watched them, her husband and her son, and felt her heart overflow. She had been so close to losing everything, and now she had more than she ever imagined. Love, family, home, all the things that truly mattered. Thomas was a healthy, happy baby who thrived on mountain living. As he grew, Joanna marveled at how much he looked like Kade, with the same dark hair and whiskey-colored eyes. Kade was a devoted father, patient and playful, teaching Thomas about the natural world around them from the moment he could focus his eyes. When Thomas was 2, Joanna discovered she was pregnant again. This time, their daughter Rose arrived in early summer, small and delicate with blonde hair like her mother. Kade was just as smitten with her as he had been with Thomas, though he handled her with even more care, as if she might shatter. "She is not made of glass," Joanna teased him. "She is perfect," Kade countered, "and tiny. I forget how big my hands are until I hold her." The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Thomas and Rose grew strong and capable, learning the ways of the mountains from their parents. Kade taught them to track and hunt, to read the weather and respect the wildlife. Joanna taught them to read and write, using the small collection of books that grew larger each time they visited Taylor. Kade's mother, Rose, came to visit when Thomas was 5 and little Rose was 3. She stayed for a month, and Joanna came to understand where Kade got his kindness and his love of learning. The older woman was delighted with her grandchildren and approved wholeheartedly of her daughter-in-law. "You made him happy," she told Joanna one afternoon as they sat on the porch watching Kade play with the children. "I always worried he was too solitary, too content in his own company, but you brought him to life in a way I never thought possible." "He saved me," Joanna said simply. "In every way a person can be saved." "You saved each other," Rose corrected. "That is what love does." When Thomas was 10 and Rose was 8, Kade made an announcement. "I have been thinking about what happens when I am gone. I want the children to have options, to have education and opportunities. So we are going to spend winters in Taylor from now on. I bought a house there, a place where the children can go to school and Joanna can have neighbors and friends." Joanna looked at him in surprise. "Kade, you did not have to do that. I am happy here." "I know you are, but the children deserve more than just what we can teach them. They need to know how to live in civilization as well as the wilderness. And honestly, I am getting older. The winters are harder on me than they used to be." It makes sense. So they developed a new pattern, spending summers and autumns in the mountain cabin and winters and springs in Taylor. The children thrived with the change, making friends in town but always eager to return to the mountains when the weather turned warm. Joanna became a teacher after all, tutoring children in Taylor who needed extra help with their studies. It was not the formal schoolhouse she had once dreamed of, but it was deeply satisfying work. Kade worked as a guide, leading hunting parties and expeditions into the high country. His knowledge and skill were in high demand, though he never took jobs that would keep him away from his family for more than a few days. Their love only deepened with time. They still made each other laugh, still surprised each other, still looked at each other with the same warmth and desire they had felt that winter so long ago when they had first fallen in love. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kade took Joanna back to the mountain cabin, just the two of them, leaving the now teenage Thomas and Rose with friends in Taylor. They spent a week there, reconnecting with each other and the place where their life together had truly begun. "Do you ever regret it?" Kade asked her one night as they sat by the fire. "Staying with me instead of going back east, becoming a real teacher?" "Not for one moment," Joanna said honestly. "This life we built, our children, all of it is more than I ever dreamed of having." "You gave me everything, Kade. You gave me everything," he countered. "I was just surviving before you. You taught me how to truly live." Years continued to pass. Thomas grew into a strong young man much like his father, while Rose proved to be both beautiful and brilliant, with her mother's love of learning and her father's practical skills. Thomas became a guide like Kade, often working alongside his father. Rose went to teachers' college in Helena and came back to start a proper school in Taylor. When Kade and Joanna's first grandchild was born, a boy named James, Kade held the infant with the same wonder and care he had shown with his own children. "We did well," he told Joanna that night. "Our children are happy and good. We did well." "We did," Joanna agreed, leaning against his shoulder. Despite the gray in their hair and the lines on their faces, they were still as in love as they had been 25 years ago. They spent more time in Taylor as the years went on, Kade's body showing the wear of decades in the wilderness. But every summer, they still made the journey up to the mountain cabin, just the two of them, to spend time in the place where their love had bloomed. On their 30th anniversary, Joanna woke to find Kade watching her, that same soft look in his eyes that he had given her the night he first told her he loved her. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I am thinking that I saw you shivering at that trading post 30 years ago, and wrapping you in my bearskin coat was the best decision I ever made. You changed my whole life, Joanna Zeller. Every good thing I have, every moment of joy, comes back to you." Joanna reached up to touch his face, now lined with age but still handsome to her. "You gave me life when mine had ended. You gave me love, family, purpose. You showed me what it meant to be truly seen and valued. I love you, Kade Zeller. I will love you until my last breath." "And I will love you beyond that," Kade promised, kissing her softly. "In this life and whatever comes after." They held each other as the morning sun rose over the mountains, two souls who had found each other in the wilderness and built something beautiful together. Their love had withstood hardship, raised children, weathered storms both literal and metaphorical. It had grown and evolved, becoming richer and deeper with each passing year. Thomas married a sweet girl from Taylor named Elizabeth, and they gave Kade and Joanna 3 more grandchildren. Rose married a teacher she met in Helena, a gentle man named William, and they had 2 children. The family gathered often, filling the house in Taylor with laughter and love. As Kade entered his 60s, his body finally began to show serious wear from his years of hard living. The old broken arm pained him more, and his joints were stiff in the mornings. But his spirit remained strong, and he still made the journey to the mountain cabin each summer with Joanna, though they stayed for shorter periods now. One summer evening, when Kade was 68 and Joanna was 62, they sat on the porch of the mountain cabin watching the sunset paint the peaks gold and pink. Their grandchildren were playing in the meadow below, their shouts of laughter drifting up on the evening breeze. Thomas and Rose were there too with their spouses, all of them together for a family gathering. "We did good," Kade said, echoing words he had spoken many times before. "Look at all of this. All these people who exist because I saw you shivering and decided to do something about it." Joanna took his hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of decades of practice. "We did very good, and it is not over yet. We still have years ahead of us. Whatever years we have left, I want to spend every moment of them with you," Kade said. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, and I still cannot quite believe you said yes all those years ago." "Always yes," Joanna whispered. "For you it will always be yes." They lived many more good years together, watching their grandchildren grow, occasionally traveling but mostly content to be at home in Taylor or in their beloved mountain cabin. Their love remained a constant, the foundation upon which their entire life was built. When Kade finally passed at the age of 76, it was peacefully in his sleep, Joanna beside him in the mountain cabin they had built their life around. His last words to her, spoken the evening before, were, "Thank you for every day." Joanna mourned deeply, but she did not mourn alone. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her with love, and she found comfort in the legacy they had built together. She lived another 10 years, spending her time teaching, loving her growing family, and keeping Kade's memory alive through stories. Rose found her one morning, passed peacefully in her sleep in the house in Taylor. In her hand was a letter she had been writing to her children and grandchildren, speaking of love and family and the importance of taking chances on hope. Her final words were, "I saw him wrap that bearskin coat around me and I knew. Sometimes love arrives when you least expect it in the form you least expect. Embrace it, choose it, fight for it. It will be worth everything." They buried Joanna next to Kade in the cemetery overlooking Taylor, with a view of the mountains they had both loved so much. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren gathered to remember them, to celebrate a love story that had started with a simple act of kindness and had grown into something legendary. Thomas Zeller stood at his parents' graves, his own children and grandchildren beside him, and told the story one more time, about how his father had seen a woman shivering at the trading post and had wrapped her in his bearskin coat. About how that single moment of compassion had changed everything, had created a family, had built a legacy of love that would continue for generations. "That is who they were," Thomas said. "Two people who chose kindness, who chose love, who chose each other every single day. That is the inheritance they left us, more valuable than land or gold. They showed us what it means to truly love another person." Young James, Thomas's eldest grandchild and Kade and Joanna's great-grandson, listened to the story with shining eyes. That night, he wrote it all down, determined to preserve the tale of his great-grandparents and their extraordinary love. The story would be passed down through the generations, a reminder that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that kindness could change lives, that two souls could find each other even in the wilderness and build something that would last forever. The mountain cabin still stood, maintained by the family, a place of pilgrimage and remembrance. Each summer, the descendants of Kade and Joanna Zeller would gather there, sitting around the fire just as their ancestors had, telling stories and remembering. The bearskin coat, carefully preserved, hung on the wall, a symbol of where it all began. And in the quiet moments, when the wind whispered through the pines and the stars shone bright overhead, those who listened closely could almost hear them still, Kade and Joanna, laughing and loving, their spirits woven into the very fabric of the mountains they had called home. Their love story had ended as all mortal stories must, but the love itself remained, eternal and unchanging, a testament to the power of two hearts that had found each other against all odds and had held on tight through everything life brought their way.